so people can like watch later if that's possible. Okay, great. How was your Fiestas de Cuenca? How you been? Did you enjoy the holiday?
Yeah, it was good. But I
Good.
think a
What
lot
did?
of us are sick now,
Oh,
like with the flu.
too burning too hard until too early in the morning.
Yeah,
That
maybe.
happens. Yeah. So what was like concerts and parties and I bet like right? What did you guys do, Vane, Angie, and Alejo?
In my case, I went to a place called Laguna de Buce. Yeah, which is an amazing place. And yeah, that's basically what I did, and eat out of my house to restaurants and stuff like that.
Right. Oh, that's wonderful. Busa is beautiful. So great. What about Alejo and Angie? How are you guys doing?
I'm just fine, thank you. I just finished my classes here in Quito, so I'm running to sit down for this class.
Oh, good, good, great, Angie.
Yeah,
How's everything going with your program?
everything's fine, thank you.
Just busy?
Yeah, a lot, but it's really cool, thank you.
Good. Alejo, how are you? Alejo is checked out. Okay. So, okay, we're gonna go through the concepts of this week. So if you open your classroom, we are going into week 3, right? Like, so we've been revising the rational, we've been revising the basis of ethics and the tastic case and how unethical practices happen in different research scenarios. But also we were revising the permits that you might need to work, specifically where when you are already in touch or in contact with particular populations. So qualitative research, most likely you will need to interview, observe, organize focus groups, and so on. So for these purposes, getting the city training and all of that is good. So one of the things about the city training is that this is provided once you, let's say, get a particular get a particular research project ongoing. So let's say you're working with a professor or in your graduate studies, and they say like, okay, we are gonna be our research assistant, and you're gonna help us with this particular project, right? So pretty much, let's say Covias or um, IRB San Francisco or any international university that does research has to have an IRB. So the IRB is the Institutional Review Board or Comité de Bioética in Spanish. And they most likely, by international protocols, will lead you to this. So the city training is an online self-directed course that you have to approve, and most likely they give you the access once you're going to enter a research project or through a course. So if you're doing graduate school, most likely in the US always happens like this. Like if you're taking qualitative research and even quantitative, if you're doing surveys and things like that, they will leave, okay, as part of the course by this day, you will have to get the city training because you need to get in touch with people, right? Like for making your practicum or working your thesis. And they will give you a diploma and a transcript, like with grades and what you did. Usually the city training lasts 5 years, depending. The first time they will give you one for just the period of the project. But then when you renew, it extends that up to 5 years. So for example, I have get my city training in 8 times in my life. It's always updated to the latest program. So for example, they have different courses such as international student sponsorship. It has other courses such as international enrollment, like logistics. It depends the kind of research you're going to do. So for example, there's examples of medical research or clinical research that you will need to, I don't know, so prescribe a specific medication and then like assess back to people how they're feeling about a particular after getting a prescription. So for example, I get like I'm a little bit sick, they will give me a couple of medications and then reassess my blood. So for make a blood withdrawal exam or a lab test, like they will need like to extract blood from me, and that needs a permit and a procedure inside of the research process. So particularly biosafety. So there's a ton of trainings depending the type of program that you're gonna do. If you're doing social research, it depends mostly in human subjects and minority populations. If you're going to work for some vulnerable populations, such as people that's incarcerated or people that has been victims of, I don't know, human trafficking, sex violence, and so on, that's a different training that has other layers. And still you have to comply with this in order to ensure the processes that you're going to take care of the data and how to manage with the people are going to be well performed. Any questions about this? The IRB procedures and the CT training.
Is that page, that CT training, is that like the only one international standard?
Yeah, it's an international standard that's provided and hosted in the University of Miami. But there's many different trainings. So for example, we in the Americas, like North America, Central and South America, follow the CT training. In Europe, most likely they do, but in other specific fields, they have additional trainings. Depends on the world region you are, but for us, most likely, if you study here in Ecuador and the United States, you will have to follow the CT training. It's not difficult. It's just a matter of like reading and taking the test online, and even you can retake it. So that's complete, and it's free once you're like inserted into a university. So it's always, you have to be under an institution. It's not like you can get it from your own, because that then it has to be charged. And also it's for making sure that people gets the permit is working in academic or scientific research, not like people getting the permit and I don't know, start withdrawing samples of people and doing research in a house or like clandestine research, you know what I mean? So it always checks up many layers of like, okay, this person's a graduate student, is being like supervised by a PhD professor, by an institution. So it always checks all of those marks. Yes, Vanessa.
In what moment we as a student from the university have to take this exam or this preparation?
Oh, right now it's not mandatory for this course, it's just information. But let's say if you later on are doing a research project that implies working with people or surveying people, they will require first the project is approved and reviewed by an IRB. And the IRB will require that you follow this training. So the particular training through University of Cuenca, it's not available, but Universidad de San Francisco de Quito is available. So many of our researchers, for example, in research projects in the University of Cuenca get the permit through San Francisco, and in order to give you and waive you the permission of all the team that's gonna be in touch with participants and patients, have to get the CT training. So all of that is part
For
of the
example,
process.
we as students here, we didn't have to, like, we're doing our thesis, right? But
Right.
the university didn't force us to take this test.
No.
There are some universities in which this process is mandatory.
Especially in graduate school. For undergrads, bachelor's degrees, or undergrad engineering degrees is not necessary. globally. But if, let's say, you go and do your master's, I don't know, in education or chemistry or public health, they will demand as part of the coursework that you get this permit. So for example, when I was doing my PhD, I had a course in qualitative research and participatory research, which was mandatory that I have to, work with people, recruit people, interview them, observe them, work with them, get in touch with their personal information and so on. So the professor in charge of that course was like, okay, Denise, like you have 3 months to get the city training approved. And once I got approved, I was able to continue my coursework. So that's usually how graduate programs work abroad, at least here in the United States. So it's not impossible to do it. It's really easy. Like the process is very clear. So the process is only informational merely in that particular realm.
Thank you, Denise.
So it is everything clear about the IRB and the city training and the importance of getting the waivers and the permits. So in the next link is also the Comité de Bioética from San Francisco. Let me share my screen again. So this is the Ethics Committee of San Francisco y Quito, and they usually charge an amount for the review, but that includes also the permits that all the researchers will get. So it will tell you about research and amendments, renewals of permits, and follow-ups, right? So it will give you all the materials of how to fulfill the IRB. And for example, which members are it? Like, so there's somebody from health, there's somebody from experiencing research methodology, bioethics, legal, and civil society. So always it has several members that will review the protocols and give you feedback. Oh, okay, like how you're going to protect the data, for example, from your participants. How are you going to ensure this data is not going to be linked to the personal informations of people once you publish your research, right? Like in a paper or a book. So all of that is reviewed very carefully, and most likely in this process, always there's suggestions for changes. It's completely normal to do your protocol, and they say like, okay, it's not approved, but you may need to make these changes now. You make the changes and it gets approved. So it's just a matter of ensuring safety for the people that's going to participate in your study. Alrighty, so keep going forward with our program. How you guys felt about the exercise about the rationale?
I had some doubts about that homework.
Okay, can you share,
Because
Vanessa?
yeah, I haven't finished the homework yet, but I had some doubts because from what part, well, a rationale is like a justification,
Mm-hmm,
but from the other in the homework,
mm-hmm,
um, you ask us to also use the table in page number 17,
uh-huh,
but I'm not pretty sure how to combine the justification with the table in page number 17 because I saw and I think that both are like different things. Like I think that the page number 17 is more like to do an outline, like more a description, a brief, short description, and the
mm-hmm,
justification is like well why your research is novel, important, and stuff like that. So I'm kind of confused.
mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's go and let's break it down because you guys need to submit this tonight, I think, right? So I mean, rationale in this particular example, a rationale as the resource I uploaded here for you, it's most likely it's justification. So it's not an introduction for a research. A rationale is overall summary of why you wanna address a particular issue in research and how that issue fills into a particular gap in literature when you are doing scientific research. So this is way beyond what you do for a thesis, let's say. It's more like reflection of how the things that you wanna research about or inquiry about actually are meaningful in the literature and addressing specific research questions and gaps that have not been addressed yet. So when you are doing research on a scientific level, it's not like when you're doing research for your thesis, right? Or for your undergrad programs. When you move into graduate school, even masters, professional masters, or specifically, more likely research masters and PhD, you have to have a level of novelty of why what I want to do is something that somebody has not done yet, or it fills in the gap that a topic has not been resolved. So it doesn't have to be big. Like you have, it's not like, oh my God, I have to like solve the dramas of the world with my thesis. No, or my research. No, it's pretty much doing a reflection why the topic you're choosing is meaningful. So when the rationale needs to be written is before you do the research project, or in the point you're right now, for example, finishing undergrad, probably thinking about graduate school, and you're writing, for example, your cover letter for applying for a program. So you need to say what I want to do is meaningful because it has not been addressed. It's necessary in my field. There's development in this area that has not been addressed. Yes, Angie.
Denise, I have a question regarding this part of the writing process, because I'm not sure if we need to quote a lot of authors and saying, based on this work, I think my contribution to the field of knowledge is going to be like that. Or maybe you just need to explain why we are doing something important. I'm confused in that part.
It's a little bit of both. So you have to be able to subtract the arguments that you say. So for example, in education, arts-based techniques for training or lectures or pedagogical tools have not been explored enough, right? In Latin America or Latin American scenarios. So you need to like situate, where are you gonna do your research? Like when are you gonna work? In what particular area and audience are you gonna work, right? And when you justify it, like you can also do like a little bit of a lit review. So the lit review has to situate, okay, these are the prior studies that have advanced the use of comics for educational purposes. However, there has not been applications in Latin America for teaching history or geography or math. My research wants to do this because it's a gap in the literature. So you first write it like that, but then specific arguments and claims, such as in Western literature, such as in the United States and Europe, these studies have been done about the use of art space, the use of storytelling for teaching techniques. I'm inventing, of course. And then you cite the authors, right? Like each of those sections, you have to be able to justify where Angie got these ideas from, right? Like for doing that, you have to read some literature, say like, okay, this is what has been done, but it has not been applied to Ecuador or Latin America. So I'm gonna do this in Latin America and other pedagogies for teaching this matter in Latin America. In that specific realm, you have to be able to cite the arguments of where you got those ideas, plus your argument that, of course, remember everything that you don't own, or everything that speaks about a broader picture, about prior studies, about prior research, has to be cited. Like, where did you get that from? So you have to cite in the rationale. So it's not only saying, oh, it's a very innovative practice, like people, professors across the pedagogies like this method because it's engaging for students. Okay, where did you get that from, right? So remember, it's not like accusatory, but it's rather like justifying where did you found that information from. So you need to cite those sources. I think, do I answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, so a rationale of a study, you have to think about doing before the research proposal. So you can have like an idea. I want to do a qualitative study to explore how engineers relate to each other in the workplace, because social skills in STEM professionals are not great, let's say, right? Where did you get that from? Citing. After, this is a prior idea. So with the idea that you already commented with the class, this is a next step. Okay, how my idea falls into a rationale. So let's see what page 17 in the book was saying. Okay, let me find that out.
Denise, one question.
Yep.
We need to include like our methods in the rational or not?
Yes, it is like a little overview of the rationale. So first you situate the context, right? And then you say, for these reasons, I want to make this study in this particular way. So you will say there, Alejo, something like, I want to do a qualitative study exploring the phenomenon or analyzing the experiences of people. Therefore, I'm going to add, I don't know, in-depth interviews or content analysis or ethnographic research, right? So let's look into page 17. Page 17. $32, $29. Okay, there you go. I have it right here. So let me reshare. Do you see it now? So it's the research process table 2.1 of the book that we have in the resources for the class. So it says that phases of study. So for making the rationale, you have to think about yourself as a multicultural subject, but also the context. So in which context, broader context. So this is like, think about from general to particular. For writing in academic research is always from general to particular. From the general idea, what's the context you're going to do your research? Is it Cuenca? Is it a body of study that has been done mostly in the United States or Europe or a particular school of thought, or for practicum studies, or more theoretical but the lack of practical? But you need to situate the story and research tradition. And then go into the ethics of how you want to approach that particular research. So then you said, like, it has been used, for example, for these particular processes, such as educating the youth about history, and children for showing them, let's say, wars or conflict in a more approachable way according to their age or things like that, right? However, in my particular context, I want to do it like this. So then you jumped into phase 2. all the philosophical areas that we already covered. So that's when the text gets like fancy and says like, therefore, through a neo-positivist or like a phenomenological or like a gender studies approach or a feminist theory approach or a critical research approach or cultural studies model, I want to do a qualitative analysis. So it's from general to particular. And then you go into the paradigm of what of the kinds of research. And then you fall into the tools that you're going to use. So it's going to be a case study, it could be a grounded theory, it could be clinical research, it could be action research as well, it could be phenomenological, therefore. And you keep walking down, and you will, already start talking about what data collection tools are you going to use. Is it going to be interviews? Is it going to be participant observation? Is it going to be ethnographical? Is it going to be textual analysis? So for example, you can say, in the case, I'm using Angie's case, for example, I'm going to analyze the comics using textbooks from the public education system of Ecuador for every sixth grade history book on the of the last 2 years. So how history has been taught through comics or any exercises that use comics or arts-based storytelling for children. So Angie could be either way doing textual analysis or coding, plus let's say interviewing teachers to see how that work, or doing observation of classrooms to obtain that data. And then you keep walking to the last section, and then you say how that research outcomes, your findings, will be used for. So with this particular study, I aim to propose policy making for educational texts in Latin American countries. Or I want to propose specific tools for teachers to instruct children or teenagers or about this type of historical events. So it's what's the purpose of what you want to do, or how useful is your research in a specific way, right? So you can say like, we're going to critique the politics and from that build a new policy guideline, or make a particular example of writing and interpretation, or analyze the policy, or make different assessment or traditions. So is it clearer now how you have to use table 17? Yes, Vanessa.
About the phase number 5, I had a doubt because in my case, I just want to do, it's more like, of course, it's a qualitative study, but I was reading that in the case, well, the way that I want to do my research is like the typical way in which quantitative researchers do the research when they begin with the qualitative investigation. So what I want to do is that um, I want to interview to teachers to know what's the way in which they, or what kind of methodologies they use to teach to students read in a, like, in the ways in which they teach students how to comprehend a text, in a specific text. That's like my idea. Um, but I'm not pretty sure what kind of contribution could it have to, like, to society in phase number 5, or what kind of proposal could I do, or I didn't understand that part, but like related with my own idea of research.
Right. So how I can help you? Which particular area are you struggling with in that section?
Maybe the phase 5, like, I don't know. I don't know, like my results. I didn't understand how like phase number 5 could be how could I do the phase number 5 in the case that well, in the case of my idea of research?
Can you tell us more about your topic?
Yes. Well, basically, I want to explore what's the perception of, or what kind of reading methodologies teachers use with their students, but interviewing them. So the way in which they teach students how to read in a comprehensive way any specific text.
Right.
Yes. So I was wondering how could I develop phase five in this case. Yeah.
So, if you take a look, it says art, practice, and politics of interpretation and evaluation. So, it's up to you. It's up to you how you want to use and how you want to propose something from your research. I'm nobody to tell you how. These are merely examples. So, if you want to assess how children is learning to read or use particular tools for reading, that can be many things. It could be tools for teachers to support children that have specific struggles better. It could be suggesting a policy analysis about education policy and the type of tools and how these particular policies affect the way we learn, which is also very important. Because if you think about it, Vane, like as we have been working so many years, like I don't know if you guys been a while in the university, right? Like at least 4 or 5 years. I think even before the pandemic a little bit, some of you, right? So what are the struggles right now, for example, in higher education that is training the next teachers, for schools K-12, is that education's shrinking to like minimal requirements. So the depth of a specific skills, it's very thin because you get courses with a limit of credits mandated by the law, right? So for example, back in the day, when I was an undergrad, I used to have, I don't know, qualitative research 1, qualitative research 2. But now you have just one course and the thesis. Is that enough? Like, I mean, if you're an undergrad, that's fine. But if you go into a master's degree, that's research, or you want to become like an educator of higher level, like you need more research. You need more depth into the use of tools and how those are used and more practical. So you can make an analysis out of that, like how equipped teachers are to teach these things. What are the resources that actually have in hand to teach these things? Because the professor or the teacher in the school can be great, but what about they don't get enough textbooks, they don't have enough resources such as material didactico or like teaching materials for that, right? Which is a drama in Ecuador right now and many countries. Even if you don't believe it or not, for example, last a couple weeks ago, my students here, I teach social media and strategic communication here. And my students were like, oh, like, professor, but you assume we know how to do videos. And I'm like, yeah, you guys are seniors. I never took a video class before. Somebody that's about to graduate, you know? So how that's actually working. Like you are doing, it's like you are learning things in a discontinued way. So therefore you cannot do more complex ways later, right? So how we go into school, right? For example, we first have like reading and then writing and then like comprehensive reading, So all of that is very worrisome. So you can do a policy analysis or something else.
if I, well, I don't have the result in it yet, of course, but
Mhm.
I can like imagine how this results from what I understood. Like I can write this phase 5, imagine how this results can be useful. Like I can say like from this results, I want to propose like this methodology, or I want to propose that this way can be better according to my data and according to maybe this theory. Something like that could be useful.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. How your outcomes of research are going to be useful, but it has to be something that you want to do. Because as I was saying, there's 1,000 things you can do with that, right? You can do tools for teachers, you can suggest changes for policy, you can make teaching materials, but what you want to do is also what the researcher is interested about. So that was the example I want to set.
And about like phase 1, and
Mhm.
we have to contextualize like our specific place in which we're going to investigate, or is more like a general context description.
It's the general context description of your research. So, I mean, don't go too broader here, right? Like, I mean, like a bad exercise would be, I don't know, after the colonization, education was created for new nations in Latin America. No, like that would be way too back in history. You can talk about specific research traditions that have been used for doing what you are doing. So, for example, in communication, I'm going to give you an example in my field. Most studies in communication have been quantitative, like for decades. But now people is like, oh, we need more qualitative participatory research. We don't need more numeric data or more mixed methods data, right? So it's actually what the discipline is telling you where to go. But you can claim things like these studies have been by decades or traditionally been this way. However, the results yield that we should be exploring different types of data to obtain different types of results, right? So
Thank you.
then you go into the paradigm of what you want to do. Yes, Vanessa.
I was saying thank you. Now I understand better, but I had like one last doubt. I'm not pretty sure um, if my research is as qualitative as I would like to, because at the end of the day, I'm asking about like teaching methodologies, like reading methodologies, but mm, I don't know. This could be like also a very specific research, just like applying a questionnaire and say the teachers, well, mark which kind of strategy do you use.
Well,
But
but that's
that's
later.
that's
That,
why.
that that's later. So you can, when you're justifying in phase one, is just like saying this is how studies have been done, but how what I want to do is different. I want to not in particularly the tool, but the purpose of your research. So you said you want to see how reading skills are being developed, right?
No,
So
I
that
want to know what kind of reading strategies teachers used in order to
mhm.
teach to read, or teach to read, but in a way that students can understand really what they're reading.
Right, like comprehensive reading.
Yes,
So for
comprehensive.
example, in that comprehensive reading, there has to be literature and studies in ways that you can relate in your research that are the classical ways, the new ways, and then you can analyze your way. So when you say about a survey and mark a survey about the qualitative characteristics of what teachers read, that's way behind. That's in phase 4. For this purpose, I'm going to do a qualitative survey and a class observation and interviews or something like that, right? Like those are the tools for collecting the data. But before that, in order to develop the study, what are the criteria that you will be observing? is going to be a critical theory. It sounds to me a little bit like critical theory, to be honest, because you want to you want to analyze how teachers are using different techniques for comprehensive reading and teaching that to students. But for what? Like, you want to know if that particular topic is useful or not, or suggest something different. Like, if it's for like analyzing how efficient it is, it could be something like critical theory. And critical theory is not criticizing everything. Critical theory is like analyzing, okay, why this works this way, but it's actually leading to other outcomes that are not linked to our research. You know what I mean? So is reading or teaching people to read this way is actually making people comprehend and engage with the text, or no? Or it's just for passing the test and then I forget what I'm reading? You know, so read a couple studies in the field of what you're doing to get a grasp of actually what it means. So going back to the rational, it's important that when you're writing the research rational, you have to think about the preliminary data that you already found. So what are the studies in your particular literature or field that are yielding or more data that's contextual or is useful or people is using highly or citing a lot to identify the gaps? So when you read a text, for example, let's say about particular things in psychology, there's this type of therapy that allows people to overcome trauma or particular issues, but also it's critical to themselves so they can engage in proactive actions for like changing behaviors and so on, right? But what are the gaps? Once the patient gets this therapy and knows what they do with their life, how they cope with emotions along the way, there's nothing, for example. So I wanna think about tools for coping in these particular types of therapy. So that's your gap. So how you find your gap? You have to read a lot of literature, in particularly the field you wanna do, to find which gap you wanna address. There's always gaps in literature. There's no answers for everything in the world. So then you go into the length of research rationale. So this is usually a couple paragraphs. It's usually a paragraph, an academic paragraph of 6 lines or 2 paragraphs of 6 lines. And it has like an overview in the way that I was telling you of the possible conclusions, gaps in the current knowledge, why is inconclusive or controversial findings that you find, and go forward into a particular research rationale and moving into other conclusions, right? So this is a paragraph for you that's useful. Let's say you are applying for a master's program and they ask you, okay, what do you want to do? Then you say this, because I realize there's a problem with this. There's no answer for this. There's no practical application of this, right? And then like say, okay, this person is actually knowing what they talk about. So for writing these 2 paragraphs, you need to invest some time. It's not like, okay, I'm just gonna vomit a couple words and that's my rationale. No. So what is the purpose, like the intellectual purpose of this is reading literature and like questioning yourself. This is a gap, but is this a gap that I can address? Is this a gap that I care about, right? Because what happens, usually, you know, especially you guys that you are in honors program, like you guys have good grades, you have, you know, the tools. And so, oh, this is a gap. I'm gonna get accepted into a master's program. And then you pass 2 years of your life or 8 years of your life or tops of a PhD, hating the research that you're doing because you don't like it, right? You don't want that to happen to you. because you're going to spend hours and time and space trying to address a gap and even publishing and getting success on that about things you don't care about. And it's really easy to realize this person just wants to publish about for the sake of publishing or getting into a program, but actually does not care about these things. Have you felt about that ever? When you met like an expert in something, like, oh, like, yeah, it's so competent, it has lots of answers and applications, but is this person actually caring about this topic? So that happens in some level of disengagement, or you're merely like using the research in a material way to get you where you want to be, and not actually engaging into creating something meaningful for the field, but also for yourself, which is the ideal balance. You know, nobody's perfect, but the ideal balance is finding a topic you care about that you can cover with your skills and focusing on that for a while in your career. So the purpose of a rational is for yourself to have it clear what you want to do with the topic that you want to do. And I know this could be like difficult to do, but it's a process of thought. Okay, I want to engage with this topic. Why? Because I care about it and I am willing to learn these skills to do it. And with the things that I'm going to propose actually excite me as well. What I'm telling you this, because when I have interviewed candidates for graduate programs or scholarships or things like that, you can easily care about, oh, this person knows it, but doesn't give a shit about solving the issue. They just want to get like the degree and that's all. And is that meaningful? That's when people like, you know, in a graduate program can get like extra competitive and not being a real engaging scholar. Instead, if you have like, okay, I'm gonna be realistic, I really care about this topic, I have no idea about these particular tools of research, but I want to learn, that's a good candidate, right? So this purpose has two purposes. Either way, finding yourself a field of research you want to keep working on, or getting yourself into a really good program that cares about you and you care about it too. Because research in the long run is a lifestyle. It's like is the way you're gonna spend some part of your life doing it, and you wanna not be biased, but you wanna believe what you're doing is meaningful. If you're doing it for the sake of the salary and getting papers out, it's gonna be a really empty life. Any questions?
Denise, in the final part of the rational, the phase number 5, well, for my project, I want to compile orators techniques for effective communication, effective message delivery. So basically, my outcome will be like the list of techniques and kind of how those specialized orators want the change the techniques in based of the audiences. I don't know if that's okay or
Yeah,
what.
it sounds good. What do you mean about the list of?
I mean,
Oh,
like maybe intonation, okay, or
okay.
using presentations or
Uh-huh.
yelling. Some yeah, some can say yelling. So
Tones. So it's
yeah.
like communicational tones. Yeah,
Yeah.
most definitely is communicational tones. I highly recommend, Alejo, that you look into some theories about discourse and public speaking, into communication and speech, so you can figure out a model of those guidelines to guide yourself. So each of you have different fields. You have to find also theories that back up what you're saying. So for example, in psychology, there might be like a model for therapy or model for engaging in particular patients of any specific issues or protocols. In education, there might be a specific tools or a specific pedagogical streams that show you how to teach a specific things, and so on and so on. So when you address these topics, also think about on the side theories that back up or provide framework to what you want to do. It could be one or it could be several. So you can, if you're talking about effectiveness of messages and audiences, you have to talk about strategic communication and audience segmentation, right? So maybe groaning, maybe there's many models there that you can revise from a Stratcom.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, guys. So for this week, thank you also, Vane, for lots of their questions have been very meaningful for facilitating this session. Otherwise, I'm losing my voice, but I'll be losing every single step of my voice today. So right here in W3 of sampling, next session, we're gonna gather, let me check my calendar. We're gonna gather on Friday the 22nd. So mark your calendars, and we're gonna cover the W3, the units in privilege and reflections of research, participatory methodologies. You will have like a lecture recorded there, sampling techniques, and also what suspending damage means, which is a reading that's really great for this particular area. So let me see if that's well charged. I want to make sure the readings are there. So yeah, you have if talks, yeah. So when you read, let me share my screen again. Oh, my Zoom. Already. So in W3, we were gonna be doing some sampling. So the privilege and reflections of how research, here after you have your rational, I wanna, after you submit this assignment and write it down, it doesn't matter if it's not perfect. Like remember, this is like for learning, so I'll provide feedback to you of what you need to change or adapt. So this paper here, I want you to take a time to read it enough because it's all about self-reflection into walking a research scenario. And then part methodology, sampling techniques that you can use, and also suspending damage. That's after reading this. So it's going to be a form, a question. Write up a paragraph of what you understood of that reading, and let's after that in the 22nd re-engage with our research topic and a class discussion of ourselves as positioning ourselves as researchers. And probably there we get more insights about how to situate now the research in a balanced way with who I am as a researcher. So that's actually the valuable section of that. Any other questions? That's gonna be for the 22nd.
Denise, one last. There's only, I mean, in the rational homework, it says write one page.
Yeah, it's
We
just
need to
one page.
fulfill one page or
Just
like,
one page. Just one
but I
page.
mean, we need to fill all the page or to make like two
No,
paragraphs of 6, like you said
yeah,
before, or one.
yeah,
Okay.
it's okay. It's in one page, usually rational what it is. It could be one good, well-written paragraph with 6 lines. It
Okay.
doesn't have to be like a well, you know, but a rational is never longer than one page.
Okay,
Mhm.
that was. Thank you.
Great. Any other questions?
Denise, good afternoon. I have a question.
Hi.
Table that in the homework about the phase assumptions. What if we must use all of them, or we just
No, just one
like?
that speaks to your research, Fernanda.
Okay, that was my question. Thank you.
Yeah, don't worry. That's perfect.
Denise,
Yes, Van.
I
Yeah.
wanted to ask you about like the homework.
Mhm.
That's like I think that the second homework